Hey guys, I'm Lewis,
And I'm John.
and today we're going to talk about liens in Ohio. So John, one of the most difficult things we come across is judgments and liens. What is the difference between a judgment and a lien?
It's a good question. So judgments are things that we see on title. What we have to determine is whether those judgments actually are liens on the real estate. If they're not liens on the real estate, we don't really care about those judgments.
So John, what determines if a judgment becomes a lien on the real estate?
Well, that's a difficult question. There's a series of questions you have to ask yourself to determine whether that judgment is a lien. First, we have to determine if that item, that potential judgment or lien, if it's currently valid.
So what do you mean by valid? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. So judgments or liens, they have different time frames. So for example, a mechanic's lien is good for 6 years, where a judgment lien is good for 5 years. Mechanic's liens cannot be renewed, where a judgment lien can be renewed. So obviously we need to determine whether that judgment lien item is currently valid, and if it's valid, then we need to move on to the next question. So the second question you have to ask yourself was that judgment lien potential item filed in the proper way?
So John, can you give us an example of a lien that was not filed in the proper way?
Sure. One good example would be a municipal court judgment. So someone can go to municipal court and get a judgment, but that in itself is not a lien on real estate. In order for the judgment item to become a lien on real estate, the item would have to be, a certified copy of that judgment would have to be taken from municipal court and then filed in the Court of Common Pleas within the county. That would be the only way that that municipal court judgment would become a lien on the property. So just being a judgment isn't enough. It just needs to be filed in a proper way in order for it to be a potential lien item. If that's the issue, then we then have to reach out and ask the next question. The next question that needs to be asked is that judgment lien item filed properly for timing purposes?
So John, what do you mean by timing purposes?
Different potential lien items have different characteristics or qualities to them. Some judgments attach to after acquired property, some judgments don't. So it has to do with the timing of when the real estate it was acquired versus when that lien was potentially filed.
So John, do a lot of liens attach after acquired property?
The answer is no. Liens that attach to after acquired property, we generally call those super liens. Those would be federal tax liens, child support liens. So those are the ones that attach to after acquired property. Most liens don't attach to after acquired property. It only attaches to property that was owned at the time that the lien was filed.
So are there any other questions we need to ask ourselves about judgments and liens?
Well, we went through the series of questions to determine whether the judgment item is potentially a lien. Assuming that we've made the affirmative on these questions, the last question we have to ask ourselves is this lien attached to our particular party?
So John, what do you mean by our particular party?
Well, that's a good question. So, for example, if our person in question's name was William Johnson, Bill Johnson, that's a very popular name. There are a lot of Bill Johnsons and there are a lot of potential liens filed against Bill Johnson. So the question is our Bill Johnson the one that has these various liens against them? Because of privacy rules, a lot of the Social Security numbers and identifying features of people have been redacted from the public records. So there is a presumption of lien against anyone with a similar name. So it's our job to do some due diligence to figure out whether or not the Bill Johnson who doesn't pay his child support, the Bill Johnson who doesn't pay his Capital One card, who have these liens, are those liens against our Bill Johnson or a different Bill Johnson?
So John, what are the steps that you would take to clear those issues up?
Well, we have to get some identifying information that we're going to keep private about our particular person, and we're going to reach out to the various creditors that have these potential lien items to determine if it is our person or someone else. And if it's not our person, then we're not going to have to deal with that issue. If it is our person, then we're going to have to worry about making that lien go away.
So what will we do if it's not our person?
Well, like I said, in our example of William Johnson, there's a presumption of lien against him. So the best practices in that case is that we would file an affidavit, not me, saying, hey, my name's Bill Johnson, but I'm not the Bill Johnson that doesn't pay his child support, his tax liens, his Capital One judgments, or whatever other liens show up under that person.
So John, how does bankruptcy play into all these liens and judgment issues?
Well, that's a good question. Bankruptcy can make judgments go away, bankruptcy typically does not make liens go away. Oftentimes, as a title company, we are the bearer of bad news that we will reach out to a consumer and say, hey, you owe this second mortgage, you owe this judgment. The consumer usually says, no, I don't, it was included in my bankruptcy. Well, what happens in those cases is that the bankruptcy wipes out the underlying debt and prevents the creditor from collecting on the debt. However, bankruptcy in itself does not wipe out those liens, and those creditors lie in waiting for the proper time where they can collect on the underlying lien. So unless the lien part of it was dealt with in the bankruptcy, we still need to collect the full payment of the second mortgage, the judgment that the consumer thought was wiped out in bankruptcy but really wasn't.
So John, we went through the steps and we did determine that the judgment is a lien on our property and against our person. What are the next steps?
The first thing we would want to do is we want to look at the actual lien and see when it expires. If that lien is going to expire in the next few days, we might suggest that we postpone the transaction for a few days in order to let the lien expire, then we can close the transaction and not have to deal with the lien. That's a good solution, but that situation doesn't happen that often. The second thing we often do is we will take a look at the amount that's owed, and if the seller or the person who the lien's against thinks that that amount is inaccurate or that they can negotiate the amount down, we will potentially suggest escrowing those funds into an account for a short period of time so that we can pay off the lien, but it will at least give the person an amount of time to negotiate it where they can maybe, it's a $20,000 lien, they can negotiate it down to 12. If that's the case, we'll pay the 12 and then refund the difference to the person. But if at the end of that 30 days or whatever time period we're using, they can't make it go away, we go ahead and pay the lien off. The next thing we can do is if there are other pieces of real estate that are also encumbered by this lien, we can negotiate for a partial payoff or a partial release of the lien. So maybe the lien doesn't go away against all the property, but we negotiate a portion of a payoff to make it go away against our property. And of course, the easiest way of making a lien go away is we just pay it off. We pay off the amount in full.
So John, what is the takeaway that we need to know about judgments and liens?
Well, the good news is that consumers, real estate agents, loan officers don't really need to be lien experts. However, it's important that they have title companies or partners who are lien experts to navigate through the process of avoiding or dealing with these issues when handling real estate transactions.
So guys, that about does it for Ohio Liens and Judgments. You can give us a call at American Homeland Title or visit us on the web at AmericanHomelandTitle.com.